Welcome to the Next Class 2.0 with host Rob Birdsell, Kent Hickey, and Aaron Barisano. Join us as we discuss the latest trends and innovations shaping education.
Hello and welcome to the Next Class. I'm Rob Birdsell, your co-host, joined this time by Kent Hickey. Kent, how are you today?
Fine, Rob. How are you doing?
Good. This is a new format for us where we actually just chat for a few minutes here before our guest and tell us who we've got today.
Well, we have Brandon Jacobs today. Brandon is a wonderful search consultant at Carney Sandoe out of Boston, and he does a number of searches for private schools, but does a lot with Catholic schools. He also does some great work in implicit bias training. So, wonderful, wonderful man, although a Philadelphia Eagles fan.
And we'll have to ask him, he's got some connection to Villanova, the Pope's University.
Yes,
I forget,
that's right.
I forget what
That's
it
right.
was, but we'll ask him about it. So excited to have him here. He was a participant in our most recent ILE seminar, which was great to have him out at Lone Rock. And so we will be welcoming Brandon in right now. Hello, and welcome back to the Next Class. We have our guest we just spoke about a little while ago, Brandon Jacobs. Welcome to the Next Class.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
It's good to see you. Looks like a little advertising in your background. I like that for Carney Sandoe.
No big deal. Small, subtle plug, right? No big deal.
Very smooth, Brandon. Very smooth.
It's almost as subtle as Kent used to have his book in his background, and he would often point to it.
Yeah. Dang.
At least we know one person read it. There you go.
Well, my mom and
yeah, two.
really
There
good
you
friends.
go.
So
Double
yeah.
up. There you
So
go.
I got to Rob. That's a great reminder. I got a new office here. I got to get my
Right.
book back up. My book, 40 Days with God, published by Paraclete Press.
Well, you could just get a poster of it like Brandon and just post it on your door. Brandon, great to have you here. Good to see you. I think the last time was up at Lone Rock, so we were just saying to our listeners, it was great to have you up there, and appreciate Carney Sandoe's support of ILE. But you are a search consultant for our listeners and viewers that may not know what that is. What is that job? What's it all about?
Yeah. It's a great question. So I'll give it in this way. So I have the blessing, honestly, working at a great company at Carney Sandoe, where we work with independent schools and private schools all across the country and really across the world, actually. And half of our company is working with placing teachers and administrators and school leaders across the way. And then the half of the company that I work with is the search side of it. So executive search that we run for schools that are also looking for presidents and principals and assistant heads and all that alike. And so I get the joy of getting to work with schools directly when they're in need of somebody in that way. I stopped short of using the word headhunter because we don't have enough time to explain why I don't like that word here in this call today, in this session. For lack of better words, I get to play a realtor. I get to play the in between the house and the seller here, and get to make the perfect match. And it's really a blessing and to see it in a lot of ways. I worked in schools for a long time. I was able to step out and do this work, and I love it because I get to find great leaders, and it's a through way to me to know that schools are going to continue to be great because we know that school leaders are what drive that. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of different learning opportunities to get to know schools at different levels, but get to make that match with school leaders, which has been a lot of fun.
So let's for a moment just shift to the other side of the house. I forget that you guys do teacher placement. Talk briefly about what that looks like.
Yeah, so on our side, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. So that's actually how we started, and many folks may not know that, but Carney Sandoe started as a teaching placement firm and is still the largest in the independent school world across the way. And so we work, again, particularly with candidates, whether you're just out of college or just out of school to start to become your teaching career, or you're looking for a change at a different time as well, too. So our team that is central, mostly in Boston, is absolutely tremendous. They work directly one-on-one with you if you are looking for a job, looking for your next opportunity. You can connect with them directly. They work by subject level. They know schools extremely well, and they know that relationship. And they get to work. They get to help you try to find that next piece and have a really one-on-one relationship with you directly. We do hiring fairs across the country, more into the hiring season starting in January, all across the country, from Philadelphia to San Diego to Atlanta to all over the place, to Boston, which is our main one. But yeah, so if you're interested in that, on our website and all those things that they can talk about, but it's a great opportunity to work directly one-on-one with a counselor, a placement counselor, who can work with you to find the next opportunity, whatever that may be. So it's a great chance for folks again, in Catholic school world, if you're looking outside the Catholic school world, there may be, but we work with all different types of schools, private, parochial, independent, across the way. So.
And before I turn it over to Kent, I forgot to mention a little bit your connection to the Pope's University.
Minor detail, yeah, minor detail. I may or may not be season ticket holders for the women's basketball team, and also you can't see my background. I don't think it's back there, but we are also big fans of the men's basketball team at Villanova University, small little school outside of Philadelphia. People may not have heard about, but we happen to have both three national championships and a Pope, the only school that can say that in the country. My wife is a graduate of the school of the education program. My mother-in-law actually played women's basketball there. My sister-in-law graduated from there. So we're big Villanova fans, even though I'm a St. Joe's alum. We don't let that kind of ruffle our feathers too much, ultimately, how much. But yeah, it's a great institution. Actually, I have it right here. Let's see.
Oh gosh, here we
This is
go.
this is the bag that my son won, actually, when he won the baby crawl last year at Villanova University. So we're kind of invested, you can say, in Catholic school there. So yeah.
I began my college career there in 1988, and it's amazing how that campus has changed in the past 30 years, though.
It's an testament to both the Augustinians, but also to the commitment of the school. I mean, just a tremendous place education wise. I mean, just from the impact they have, obviously putting out alums like the Pope, obviously now, but just tremendous folks in different walks of life. Doesn't hurt when you have a really good basketball team that can help out on the back end too. But yeah, it's a great school, and we do a lot of work with them now, actually, in a lot of ways. So it's a great university, one of the best, as we might say. So.
Yes.
Well, I'm a Marquette guy, so I'm not a huge Villanova fan. Just to be honest with you here. And 1977 champions goes back a little bit there. We have not been as strong in basketball because when we're recruiting basketball players, we only recruit players who are open to joining the priesthood. And so that's a big part of Marquette basketball.
There you
and
go.
If you believe that, Brandon. Well, anyway,
so
and we are Packers fans also on this podcast.
Yeah, we all make
Eagles
mistakes,
fans,
like we
so,
say.
But
yeah, so that's fine.
but you know what, Brandon? It's still good to have you. And I'll say that I've known Brandon for some time because I had a cup of coffee at Carney Sandoe, but worked about a year doing search work and got a chance to meet with Brandon and others. It is a wonderful firm, and there's a Catholic practice part of it that is headed up by Barbara Dausch. So, and that's kind of how Brennan and I got to meet. But my question relates, Brennan, more to what are you seeing in leadership trends? Because here's what I was struck by with Carney Sandoe. Carney Sandoe would have these Wednesday morning meetings, and they would engage in discussions regarding trends going on. I remember one of them was, hey, when do head of schools lose their job? Is it with the second board chair, or is it with the third board chair? And so, what do you're so dialed into this area.
Yeah.
What are the leadership trends that you're seeing happening in our schools, independent, Catholic, whatever you see?
Yeah, great question, Ken. So yeah, I think it's a great kind of approach. One of the beauties of working at Carney Sandoe is that we're one of the biggest, if not the biggest firms. We get to see things from different levels, right, and really have an opportunity to see schools in different ways. I think the biggest trend that I can personally say, I think we've seen it particularly in Catholic schools, but also I think in independent schools alike, is the need for continued growth around advancement of leadership, right, and thinking about how do we drive leaders, understand what it looks like, and that I think is different than it was when you took over, when you were ahead, and when you were working in schools as well too. I mean, just the difference of how I think for a long time we had more of a focus potentially sometimes around the idea of the pastoral care, maybe kind of leader in a school, whether that was a principal, whether that was a president, whatever model they may use. I think the biggest shift that we're seeing now is a need for additional folks, right, to also have other skill sets as well too, right? So thinking through the financial parts, thinking through the advancement parts, thinking through the fundraising parts that maybe wasn't part of the leadership kind of piece before. You have really a leader who has to also be the spiritual leader of the school and be at the front of the school and do all those things, and while at the same time lead an organization, right? So I think that part of the structure and part of the struggle, honestly, that we've had is to find that kind of that needle in a haystack, and we tell tell people all the time, if you're looking for a unicorn, don't call us, right? Go look for a children's book. We're looking for leaders, we're looking for drivers, we're looking for people that can do this work, and nobody's perfect, right? And I think that's probably the biggest the run up we run into is that schools have in their mind sometimes, organizations have in their minds, this perfect leader that can do all of these things in all these situations. And I know I'm on a Catholic podcast, so I probably shouldn't say this, but Jesus Christ himself couldn't do some of the things that we're asked sometimes of all these schools. That's a little bit of a joke that we have, but I mean it in a way that it's sometimes we forget that they're human beings, right? These are people that can lead that way. So I think the onus and the pressure in a lot of ways that comes with being a school leader is very different. Maybe not higher or lower or whatever it may be, but different than it used to be, where you have legal conversations and you've got all different parts that used to be the case. So I think part of our work, but I think part of the larger constituents across independent school worlds is to build these leaders, understand these skill sets, and prepare leaders for tomorrow, not necessarily just for today, because schools are rapidly changing like they should. The last thing I'll add here is I think that the tenure numbers as well too that we've seen over the years, again, we could talk about at length, used to be more so 15, 20, 25, 30 years of leaders that you would have. 5 to 7, maybe somewhere in that range or whatever it may be, is a really good tenure for schools at this point. And there's nothing wrong with having a great leader for 5 years, because schools somewhat change every 3 to 5 to 7 years anyway, right? So I think to answer your question, Ken, I think part of it is meeting the need for leadership with the right leadership and with the right opportunity, the right moment, and realize that every leader isn't meant for every moment, and that's okay, and that's fine. So I think as we think through that as schools and as organizations, programs like ILE, for example, build that part of leaderships as well. That it's not just the one trick pony anymore; it's the whole piece, which is different and what it used to be, but it's exactly what we need right now, which is exciting to be a part of.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, Brendan, when we had our first seminar at iLeaf in 2019, 17 heads of schools.
Right.
Today, of those 17, only 4 are in the same job.
Wow.
One has retired. The rest are all still in education in some form, but they've changed jobs. Which gets to your point of tenure and turnover.
Right.
What
Right.
what do you think is sort of the root cause or at the bottom of that tenure changing from 15, 20 years to 5 to 8?
Yeah, I'll put my sociology hat on for a second. Maybe not necessarily my Carney Sandoe hat on. To say that I think that trends and changes are predictable sometimes, but also not, right? And I think that part of this is you look at the world and where we are today with, again, all the things that are swirling around, both politically and economically, and all the things that happen. I think we'd have been the perfect storm, right? I think schools who look at opportunities in a good way to say, look, we need a leader that can do this or do that. So I think that for me personally, that when you understand and see some of that, again, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that that's the case, that there are people moving on. However, I think that part of the thing that we lose a little bit is the institutional knowledge. We lose some of the depth that goes with that. But I think that to answer your question directly, where I think some of that led to is probably a handful of different things that kind of combine together, right? So I think we have folks who've been there for a while who've decided to move on and all those things. But there's also, like you mentioned before about board chairs, kind of a little bit like how we saw that numbers and the shifting that happens and that plays out. COVID, right? Honestly, so many ways people change their minds in different situations, and people that we talk to leaders now, when they understand that we call the big three of, am I going to be happy, right, at this job? Is this job going to be worthwhile in terms of my work and my experience and my passion? And is my family going to be happy, right? That third rail is a huge part of this that, unfortunately, we don't want to talk about, that a spouse or a child or something comes up, and that's life, and that's okay, right? That's not the end of the world. I think that what also goes with a little bit of tenure that we've seen on the higher side of things also goes to teachers as well too, right? My wife works at an independent girls Catholic school outside Philadelphia here. She took her job on August 18th in 2018, right? That would have never happened 10, 15 years ago. Teachers were locked into things. They were going to be there forever. We believed in contracts and all that stuff, and we still do, right, for sure. But the flexibility and need to adhere to family is a real capacity now, right? And I think that the teaching world, I think that the last couple of years we've seen in the media, we've seen that the stories about the education world and teachers on the decline. It's real. It's a real thing. It's a hard field. Probably more harder than it's ever been, right? And also at the same time, more rewarding than it's ever been as well too. So when that kind of perfect men meets together, I think you're in a situation, to your point, that like people decide to make decisions, and that's okay. Do I think it's sustainable? Do I think it's long term? I don't know, right? I think that we'll see things settle out, and things will get better as things move on. But the ability for schools to lock their head into this idea that we might have to move leadership every couple of years or so, may not be the worst thing as long as we're prepared for it. And I don't know, Ken, we talked about this a little bit too. Like one of the bigger issues, you didn't ask this question, not to ramble too much, but one of my bigger issues in independent schools and also Catholic schools as well too is the lack of continuity a lot of times needed in really setting up next leaders, right? Who's second in charge in case something is to happen, or if a person decides to leave, do we have that kind of chain of command kind of set up? And a lot of schools don't, right? A lot of schools don't have a number two or a number three, a person that can step in if something happens, and then you end up in situations where you have interim leaders and you have and differences. So that's, and it's not the end of the world either, but I think we can do a lot more, I think, better across the way in really preparing the next group of leaders while they're not leading right now of what that might look like to expose them for that, so they are ready to step into the shoes when needed. So
Yeah, really good stuff, Brandon. It seems like over the years, and so I was first head of school in a previous century, so I started in 1999, but it seems that over the years, there was an assumption earlier on that in terms of the president role, well, the principal moves into the president role.
Yeah.
Okay, not at all anymore, right? And because you're talking about, and they're not exclusive, but you're talking about managerial expertise, and you're talking about pastoral leadership,
Yep.
and both of those actually have to be present in the president. Probably no one goes into it fully fleshed out in either one of those areas.
Yeah.
And so have you, I guess it's a leading question here. It seems like there's more and more of the leaders are being drawn from other areas.
Yeah.
And for presidents, that includes outside education per
Yep.
se.
Yep. It does, yeah.
Yeah.
It's I'll use a bad analogy. You mentioned the Packers before earlier, thinking about kind of football for a second, but it is between a general manager and a coach, right? These are two separate kind of entities, and there's not a lot of coaches who go just directly from that to general manager, and not a lot of general managers that can do the coaching part because they're different jobs. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think for schools who really understand the president principal model, started by the Jesuits, and the power of having two amazing people that can do both of those things, that's the real treasure behind it. So again, it would be a little bit aloof to think that you could actually just transition from that role without thinking about the skill sets that are different required. And so to your point, Ken, like having folks who have different experiences, different backgrounds, a big shout out just for a second to the Crystal Ray Network, who does a tremendous job of looking at leaderships and thinking about this structure, that a lot of their leaders have come from outside the education world. And that's a great thing sometimes, right? To have a different experience and a background, but can also still be the spiritual leader of the school. But that requires to have a strong principle then, right? To understand the difference between the two. A person that's 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out the door, all those type of things, all leads to this great kind of symbiotic relationship that ends up being great for kids, right? So I think that part of this is checking you at the door and saying, hey, I have my job and I have my lane, and I'm going to do that, but also working very again in partnership with that other person to drive that. So yeah, I mean we see it a lot. We're constantly tapping folks and getting a little creative. I'll just say that I think that sometimes as well too in leadership, particularly at schools, we get so locked into what we think proverbially a leader needs to be or should be, that we create this own box ourselves about what this could look like or what it has to be. And we challenge people a bit to think about, instead of saying let's think outside of the box, I want to think at why is there a box to start off with, right? Let's completely open this up to who's the best person that can work with teachers and understand that level. And again, does a person have to have had 20 years of teaching experience to understand the grind and the tiredness that teachers have? Not necessarily, right? I think that there are people who understand that, and are there great educators who can do it? Yes, as well too, right? They just need a different skill set to do that job. So it's a little bit of both, but I think part of it is taking a step back to take a step forward in this idea of what's best in terms of the model and the structure, without losing sight of what the long-term goal is, which again is to just be able to spiritually and academically support kids, period, end of sentence. But how you do that, I think, is the part that I'm talking about.
Let me just, Rob, follow up on that. One of the comments Brandon just made, because I think it goes to one of the questions we want to ask about when you mentioned box. Like I love the way that you phrase that. Let's just talk about why there's a box, And one of the things, Brandon, I know that you did, and I sat in on one of these, and I thought it was excellent, is that you do implicit bias training, and the things that you brought up in that session. It's like, gosh, I hadn't thought about that, but that's so good, because boards that generally are doing the hiring, they do, like all of us, they do kind of have a box, right? And I think, can you help explain how do you do implicit bias training to try to just open up different ways of viewing things?
Yeah, great question, Ken. I appreciate the so circa about 5 years ago, so we had a lot of conversations with Carney Sandoe about how do we, as both search consultants and board members and search committee members, and even just educators in general, look at resumes and cover letters, and what are the barriers sometimes that cause us to see past the candidate or not give a person the best shot. And so we created this training that is about 90 minutes or so that we do with almost all of our, not almost all, but a good amount of our search committees who it's an optional thing to do, but it's been really helpful to just take a step back and just pause and talk about for a second a little bit the human nature that comes into decision making, right? We're not wagging our finger or telling people you're awful and you make terrible decisions. It's quite actually the opposite. It's to say, look, you're human, and here's how many decisions. I mean, on average, human beings make about 35,000 decisions a day, right? There's a good chance you're going to make a mistake, right? There's understanding that it's there. So our approach to this is take a little bit of a different side of it to say, look, let's talk about, to this point of the box, let's talk about how we as organizations or search committees or groups can take time to really understand our individual biases that show up in these conversations. Realize they're not going to be checked at the door. Actually, they're going to come with us into this conversation. And how do we allow ourselves the grace and the compassion and the empathy to be okay with that and challenge ourselves to be better about it moving forward, right? The research will show that the more that you're able to talk about it, the more you're able to have lexicon and language behind it, the better off you are, right? That's how we look at it. So again, we're not trying to eradicate it. Actually, we're trying to leverage it. Ironically, we're trying to bring into the conversation this ownership of, I'm going to be human. I'm going to bring this part. I'm going to like this person because they went to Marquette. I'm going to love this person because they like to wear cheese heads on Sunday afternoons. Whatever, fine, right? That's okay. But at the end of the day, who's the best person for kids, right? Can I take those parts out? And I think it's been really helpful with all of our schools to really just allow people that, again, the grace, the depth, the understanding to be okay with, how do I make a decision? How do I think that part through before I jump into reading a resume and do all these things? And again, we are doing the best intentions and best in mind and all those things, but we're going to make mistakes. And so, yeah, we've had the opportunity and really enjoyed doing it. We're over 200 in the last couple of years. We really enjoy working with schools about them. We do it with schools, we do search communities, we also do it with admissions groups, we do it with college counseling groups, we do it with boards. Again, it's just for us to think about how do we allow ourselves and our brain for a second to just pause to think through, am I potentially biased in the situation? Because nine times out of the answer is 9 times out of 10 the answer is yes, and it's not the end of the world. It's to say, okay, with that in mind, can I understand how I can make a good decision both now and then also moving forward? So
We're going to take a brief pause and get a word from our sponsor.
Catholic Virtual is a proud sponsor of the Next Class 2.0 and dedicated to supporting Catholic school leaders. Our partner schools turn to us for online teaching solutions that fill teacher openings, expand their catalogs to offer more course choice, and provide options for students an alternative learning experience. Learn more about how we can support you at catholicvirtual.com.
Welcome back to the next class. Brandon, we've talked a lot about leadership and transitions and some of the trends. Why would a school use a search firm? Why would they not just go on their own and do this? What would you say to a school that's got a leadership transition coming and
yeah.
they're considering a search firm?
Yeah, great question. So Rob, for me, it's a couple different things, right? I think it makes sense. And I think, again, I'll just say it somewhat probably out loud. I think schools can do this on their own if they'd like, but what we would say is that leadership is one of the most important things you do at a school, right? I think that with the exception of recruiting and bringing in great families and educating and keeping those families safe, the third one right behind that is how we hire people, right? Is what we do around recruitment and retention and structure. So our ability, I think, as a search firm to be the kind of the third rail, to be outside of the conversation, to offer suggestions, to offer recommendations. We're not coming in to tell you exactly how to do it or what's going on. It's your school, right? It'd be very presumptuous for us to walk in and get to know you and say, oh, you know what, you can just do this and do that. We listen, we learn with you in a lot of the process. And I think for the schools, particularly what you will learn through how we work is a lot about yourself as well, too. We will pull in the information and the data. We will ask the hard questions that you sometimes can't ask to really get at some of the conversation. So that's a big part of it, I think. And then the second part, just from a true honest answer, is that the network that we have, similar to organizations that are out there as well, too, it's just expansive that you may not be able to catch everybody, right? So to be able to know that we have the opportunity, both in terms of our network, but also outside of our network, to tap great leaders who may not be looking to leave, may not be thinking they're ready to go. When I first reached out to Ken a couple of years ago about the job that I helped help place him in, I may not have been thinking about Garces, California at that moment, right? So like, how do we wrap our head around that? Our job as matchmaker, right, is to think outside of the situation to do what's best for you all. And so I think the power and the ability sometimes for search firms and for consultancy groups like this to be the outside is to take that part off of your shoulders as a school, and you can just lead the school, and we can take part of that, and we take it with such a great honor, and we're so blessed and so lucky to work with great schools. We take that not lightly. We get into it. We get to know schools. It is my wife jokes every time I go to a Skype site visit. She writes on our board that we're not moving to X school because she knows I love these places and I get excited about it and what's going on because we're finding great people to change kids' lives. So I think if nothing else, the money that's spent to work with us is well spent because again, over the long time tenure of it, to find a great leader that's going to be there and not have to do this again a year later or 2 years later because it didn't work is worth the time and the effort. So I think that for us, it's a huge part to be able to both help your school but also find great people because of our network.
Let me just follow up on that last one. I guess two quick questions because I know we're
Please.
reaching toward the end here.
Yeah.
But that interim, yeah, that's how I met Brandon. Was I did the interim president's job at Garces and Bakersfield because they were transitioning to a president principal model. They didn't have that model. Had never done it before.
Yeah.
Actually liked it a lot. Like I told
Yeah.
people, I wouldn't want to be a permanent head again. Myself because I did it a long time, but the interim jobs were kind of interesting. And then now I also tell people could be really good for your school to have an interim.
It is, yeah. It's a great the way I look at it a lot of times and the way we kind of frame it is it's a great setup and a great gift to the next person actually sometimes because what will happen in a lot of ways with the intern can do and especially a good one like yourself Ken, right, can really help to reset sometimes the mechanism at the school that needs to move forward, right? Sometimes if we launch too quickly into a new head without really dealing with whatever we were dealing with, whether it's trauma or just time or whatever it is in that situation, we jump right into it. A lot of times, particularly when we're replacing a head that's been there for a long time, right? We just think we can just change gears to a new person. And that's just not how it works, right? It doesn't really always go that way. So I think the intern is a great option for schools to just pause for a little bit to say, look, let's find a person that can help us lead the school, do the school part of it while we figure out the rest of the cultural part. And why it's a gift to the next person, I would say, is that I think that a lot of ways as new leaders, we don't get that time when we walk into an opportunity to really just to get to know things, right? We have to do it all on the fly. We call it sometimes like the year of anthropology, right? Where you sit and try to like hear out what's going on. You can't do that as a new person, unfortunately, as much as you used to be able to because there's so many things that happen. Where the intern can help is that person can do all the things that happen, and then when that person takes over, they can spend the time and the effort to really get to know a community, really get to know the experience before they start to make bigger decisions. And then that tenure for them in a lot of ways is set up to be successful. So again, it's not perfect for every school. It's not always possible, but I think if a school has the chance to do so and the opportunity to do so, to find a great leader who can give you a little bit of a stopgap to be able to reset is a really powerful tool. So.
Brandon, getting off of leadership back to teaching for a bit, are you seeing trends around the teacher shortage that was just massive a couple of years ago? So during the pandemic, one school that Kent and I work with through Eiley had 20 teacher openings one year.
Wow.
This past year, they only had 6.
Yeah.
Catholic Virtual came in and had virtual teachers where you couldn't find teachers.
Mm-hmm.
We're not seeing it as much. Can you just talk a little bit about the trends in the teacher turnover?
Yeah, Rob. So it's helpful, I think, to give context for this. I think sometimes we get, whether it's the media or whether it's just the reality of the situation, we feel it can always feel worse than sometimes what it actually is, right? When we see what's going on, and I think that the teacher shortage a couple of years ago was definitely, again, not to sell it short or what's going on. It was definitely a huge concern, but it may not have been as skies the fall as people may have thought have been because there's still great people out there who care. What I think they were met with, whether it was the pandemic or the realities of the world, is that they also had families to care for and lives to care for and what's going on, and so when those things finally hit each other, we had some really good conversations with folks that think what's best for them, right? One of my best friends, really quick story, is that he was a teacher for a long time, math teacher, got plucked by an outside organization to come work for them because they realized he had a great skill set. He was a great math teacher and knew numbers. They basically headhunted him and said, hey, would you like to work from home and not work with parents and not have to deal with kids, and we'll pay you more and you can do all these things. And he's like, sounds good. So we had a teacher of the year candidate who left their school because of the fact that these are realities that happen. So I think that now that things have reset a little bit, to your point, Robin, things are a little better ultimately. I think it's there, but this is my one disclaimer to schools. just like we learned in an interesting kind of whiplash effect, and this is the sociology again talking again too in my head, of we had a situation during the pandemic, to go back to 2020 and 2021, where parents for the first time got to see their kids at home in like the real life jungle that it is to deal with your kid all day long. And we were so grateful for teachers when they went back to school, that we were doing all the things, all type of stuff. And that was met with this interesting opposition at the end of like, why aren't we back in schools, and why aren't teachers doing these things, and why do they get 3 months off in the summer and I don't, and all these things. And it happened so quickly. That's what my personal opinion caused this dissonance and this real battle with teachers and the shortage that created this national narrative of, oh, they don't want to work or they don't want to do this or that type of thing, versus saying these people work their tails off all day long and they care about what I consider to be the greatest commodity in the world, which is your child, right? To be there. Where's the respect for that and the understanding of that? So I say that as a cautionary tale of like, we could be back in that situation again very soon if we're not thoughtful around both the economic needs that are there for teachers, but also, if nothing else, just the respect of realizing these people give their lives and their passion and their careers to help impact your child's life and really impact the world ultimately moving forward. We need to understand that and get creative, if nothing else, to realize that we need to meet their needs. So whether that's some schools I'm working with right now, for example, or I've heard about that, 4 days teaching, 1 day off, and they have a different model and structures. Like, are there ways to get really interesting around the fact that teachers don't have the same flexibility that other fields do? And if we don't get smart about that, the next generation of leaders and teachers are going to see that, and they already are right now, right? To say, why would I go work in a classroom every day when I can work from home, or I can be nimble and be flexible? There's just something to be thoughtful around that moving forward. So I think, Rob, we're in a better spot, and I think it's moving forward in a better way. But if we're not continuing to commit to the impact and the well-being and the mental health and the economic structure for teachers, we could be in a situation again where we're going to need them more than we did before. So it's just more of a thought to not think we're out of the woods quite yet. I think there's still a lot of work left to do.
I remember when Kent and I were at Market High many years ago together, and we had parent-teacher conferences one night, and so we got a late start the next day at 9 instead of getting to school at 7:15. We got to get there at 9, and I took the dog for a walk, and I was like, "Huh, so this is what normal people do." Like,
This is what the sun looks like at this time in the morning, right? Because you're so, and that's the reality of it. That again, part of it that, and my wife's an educator and I love her to death, and she works at a Catholic school as well. But she's a different person in the summer when she is during the 10 months out of the school year because of what goes on there, and that takes a toll. That takes a time and effort. And these are folks who give their lives and again so much of their effort to be there. How we respect that both in, again, everybody's like, oh, just throw more money at them. That's not the solvent. Sometimes that's not what they need. So really listening and hearing from your teachers and hearing from educators what they want and what they need, I think counterbalances or balances along with the need for leadership that we talked about before too. What are leaders going through, and understand their jobs are different than they used to be too. So all to say, education is not as simple as people make it out to be. And I think as we think that through moving forward is really important.
Well, just quick follow up with that is, but back in those days with those parent-teacher conferences at Market High, this is Milwaukee, there actually was a keg, and so people would walk around with beers as they go to meet with
So maybe
teachers
that's
at
the
the
salt. I
cafeteria.
don't know.
Yeah.
I can't say that out loud and keep
Not
my
sure
job.
if that was
Give it
an awesome
out,
idea,
but,
looking
yeah.
back at it. But the other point that I'd make is just regarding your last one, Brandon, is
Yeah.
that actually one of your competitors who does a lot of work in Catholic searches put out a blog saying it really is about compensation, just about compensation. And of course that is important, but when he's saying like it's got to be, he said it's got to be like for a leader, a country club membership. I don't think any Catholic school leaders are looking for country club memberships. I think they think compensation definitely has to be examined, but they're looking at purpose, meaning, making a difference, right?
Yep. And how does their family fit into that, right? And I
Yeah,
think that's a
yeah,
part you need to remember too, right? Thinking about tuition remission, thinking about college. I mean, all these things that are there. I think it's again, it's realization that teachers are not these stoic statues in front of your students all day, right? These are caring individuals who have lives of their own and situations. So yes, I mean, I think it's part of it to think through the total compensation we talk about, just like the total package that's there, is both respect. I mean, there's teachers that I work with, especially in Catholic schools, right? To your point, work for the mission, not for the paycheck, right? But you're not gonna find a better person and a more caring person. And they would do it 10 times out of 10. But if you give them more money, that's not what they're looking for. You actually go the revert effort. Like you're not listening. So a lot of it is taking sometimes, again, this larger approach to teachers to realize that if we want to keep them, we want to grow them, we want them to be who they want to be, we have to know who they are actually. Who are they as individuals? What do they need in a lot of ways? That can sometimes be time, that can just be growth and availability. You can educate more education, whatever it is, right? It's not that we need to be beholden to teachers' needs. We need to be respectful of them. We need to know that they are also part of it and not just a cogs in a wheel. They are the wheel along with you. It's a whole picture across the way.
And having said that, there are a number of Catholic schools though that really do have to examine their compensation.
Yeah, totally,
Because if they're
exactly.
making
Yep,
less than
yep,
half of the local public
yep,
school and
yep,
such, so
exactly,
there. I mean,
exactly.
that's a family thing too.
Yep, a
Like
huge part of that. Yep,
religious take vows of poverty. The lay people
yep.
don't, kind of live it. Kind
Exactly.
of always was the
Yeah,
joke. So
yeah.
anyway,
Well, Brandon, we could go on and on, but I want to respect your time. And we do have one final question that
Please.
we ask all of our guests. You did a little homework, so I think you know what's coming.
Yeah.
Who was your greatest teacher and why?
Yeah, so I did. So with the exception of my grandmothers, who I will always call to be my greatest teachers in this world, along with my parents, my favorite teacher of all time, I'll give you two really quickly. One is my second grade teacher, Robin Wademan, and we still talk to this day. And why I say that she was my favorite teacher, she was the first teacher I had, even at that point then and even today, who saw me for more than just myself and saw me for what I could be, right? And I think that's the power of education, is not just looking at the current child or the person in front of you, but seeing past them, see through them and with them to what they can be. And she was and still is to this day a person who was able to do that for me personally. That changed my life. And then the other one really quickly is my college professor, Dr. Raymond Gunn, who interesting enough led the education world talking about educations, partly because he fell in love with a study he did regarding male nurses, actually, which involved my uncles who were both male nurses, and he became a male nurse. But that's another story for another day. But why he was so important is that he was the first African American male teacher I ever had in my life. And it wasn't until my junior year in college that I had him. And I walked into the room and felt like for the first time, like, well, this is interesting. This is what everybody else has kind of felt like for their entire life. And it's not to say that, and I hopefully hear people hear me loud and clear. It's not to say you have to have a person that looks like you to be your educator, obviously, right? The person I mentioned before, Rob Lane, is a white woman who was just absolutely tremendous in many ways. But Dr. Gunn related on a level because I think that he saw me as what, and he took me to a place in which that I didn't know I could get to, because I think that teachers on the back end of seeing through you, they tap into the potential because they want to see that potential in you. And I think for me, having both bookends, the teachers who were both at the beginning of my career and the end of my education career, who saw that in a lot of ways. They were rock stars then. They're rock stars till this day. But they're people who cared, I think, more than just the curriculum, but cared about the character of the person that I was and who they were, and that's why they were so impactful, both for me, but for hundreds and thousands of students. And I would say probably why I'm an educator today, because of two people like that and others who I can go on all day about, who believed in not just the book, but in what we had to learn, but how we were to live. And I think as you tie that together and think about a lot of ways that we think about Catholic education, we think about education as a whole, that's what it's about, is about how do we make students and people better tomorrow than they were today, period, end of sentence. And it's about adding that fourth R to the three R's we used to talk about of writing and reading arithmetic, which I still don't understand how that works. But the fourth R of relationships. And really, those are two teachers who built relationships and built character and built people in me that I'm forever grateful to, and hope that I can continue to give that to somebody else moving forward. So
Great. Well, Brandon, great to see you. Thank you for joining us in the next class. And I'm sure your insights will be greatly appreciated by many, many leaders out there. So thank you for your time.
thank you both. I really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Brandon.
No problem.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, Kent, that was great. I mean, Brandon
Yeah.
has so much insight for schools. That he came from education. I think is really powerful. But what are your takeaways?
Well, one takeaway is we maybe should do a second session with Brandon at some point, because I feel like we just were skimming the top. There's a lot of the things that we went through there that we could dig down much deeper. Things like compensation, which is clearly a trend, and there's a lot of data around that. And things like the interim, as I that more and more I think about that. And Brandon's response to that was, sometimes if they put an interim in place, it's viewed as like a failed search. But what if it were a plan? Let's say it was someone who was there for 20 years, and it's like, you know what, we just can't have this next person go right in. Or what if some hard decisions have to be made, particularly around personnel? are you going to welcome the new president or head of school? Say, by the way, there's probably 4 or 5 employment situations you're going to want to deal with your first year. And so to put that on a new person is hard. So anyway, I think we just scratched the surface in a lot of ways, but I think our listeners would enjoy the side from the leadership and from the teacher's perspective. Very, very good.
It was interesting, his comments around the teacher shortage and what had happened where we are today. I just really loved his comment about his 2 favorite teachers, though, and it got me thinking about in our last podcast, Aaron and I we actually mentioned Gordy Sharafinsky, who you and I worked with, and my first year of teaching,
Great
and
guy.
he said, Rob, all you got to do is love your students, and everything else will be fine. And you saw that in Brandon's two favorite teachers, the love that he felt from the 2 of them. And sometimes we make education so complicated, and it really just can be so simple too. Just love your students.
Well, there's no good teaching without that.
Right.
You don't teach subject, you teach kids.
Yep.
And that's, and yeah. And then Catholic schools, that's what's supposed to make us different. And I think it does. The differentiation in Catholic schools and it's all flowing from mission. It's all flowing out of Jesus is our model, and he didn't love necessarily rules as much as he loved the people he was with. So
that's a great line to close us out here.
All right.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us on the next class. If you liked this show, please give us a thumbs up.
But
5-star.
Like us too.
Because this is all about just, we want you to like us. Anyway, thank you for joining us. A little shout out to our new producer, Carlos, has joined us this year.
Yes, Carlos. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos, for joining us direct from Mexico. So thank you all, and have a great month. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in.